Number one, it can be an opportunity to expand your current addressable market, and for two, it might be a need to expand the addressable market. Yeah, so I think that should be the first question to answer. As long as I still have enough room to grow in my home destination and my growth curve and trajectory is still, let's say, uninterrupted, I think defocus is something that should definitely limit. And on the other hand side, if the model is working well and you have a proven system and the metrics are showing that your business is thriving, there might be at a certain point the stage where you can leverage a huge opportunity by expanding and multiplying what has worked well in your home in your home geography and to other countries. And so sharing our own experience, we were much rather going down the second path. So I think in logistics and freight forwarding, the core market of Forto. So we are basically a Berlin-based logistics company that helps more than 2,500 B2B clients by now to import or export their goods, with the core focus in China, Germany, which I'm explicitly happy to be today also part of this panel. We had a product that was working well in the German market today. So 92% of our customers are German-based and are now about to plan our international expansion going into adjacent European countries, because we know what works in Germany can be expanded now to other European geographies. And at the same time, for the last 4.5 years, the market was big enough for us to grow at 2.5 to 3x year over year, given the sheer size of this industry.
Okay. It's always good to hear successful startup stories from Berlin truly going international in Europe and also in Asia. And that brings me to you, Christopher. You scout startups at a very, I would say, relatively early stage. And tell us something about what they are thinking at that point of time, and how do you really change their vision to think about, okay, let's think about going international from the very beginning. What's the role of German Accelerator in motivating startups to go international?
Yeah, I mean, what we see is that as German startups participate in our programs, for example, it's market discovery programs, both in the US and in Southeast Asia, and also market entry programs. And what we regularly see is that the German startups struggle with the basics of internationalization. And this also shows that it's very important to see internationalization as a process that you have to start right from, as you said, right from the inception of your business, that you have to think your business internationally. Especially, you need to consider that there's like soft skills, hard skills coming into that commercial toolbox that you need, also the mindset for internationalization. And so we help startups basically, or we build the bridges to overseas market, build the awareness of overseas opportunities in Southeast Asia and in the US. And especially we help build awareness how to do business over there, how to do business in Southeast Asia, how to do business in the US. And what we do is we provide startups with access to the particular markets. We do it by connecting the startups with lead mentors, with experts who have a very deep vertical expertise in the particular market, and through that we help the startups work towards the product market fit, to identify who is actually demanding our product. So what is the problem that we want to solve in the overseas market? What is the solution in this particular market? So that's most important for the startups to then achieve product market fit in Southeast Asia or in the US.
So actually, I'm going to come back to you on that, because when I hear Southeast Asia, already I have so many questions when it comes to expansion. But let's zoom into Stefani right now.
Yeah, actually, I very much agree with what he have said. It's about, because I think for startup, at the very first beginning, you have to think about where is the end destination market, like from which market people will purchase your product. So for some startup, if they started in Germany, they were looking at Europe as a second step for them to expand. So at the very first beginning, before they decide the product, they should think about whether this product can apply to Europe or not, right? So the situation I face is because actually I mentor a lot of startups. They were started in Germany, but they were expanding to China. Then by the time they have already the product ready, they will face the situation that actually sometimes the market needs in China, they are a little bit different. So what's the consumer looking for in another market, sometimes it's very different as to the culture, the mindset, the environment, and a lot of things. So I'm very much agree with what he have said. It's actually, your question is when we should go international. So I think it should be started at the very first beginning. You should think about that.
Okay, so yes.
Okay. Yay, so we have new faces. Hello. Hi, Kevin. Okay, I can look at you here as well.
Hello.
Hi. Did you get a chance to catch the earlier part of the panel, or this is the first time you're seeing us talking?
Very first time.
Okay.
Very nice setup.
Perfect. Then welcome, and I would like to introduce you to other panelists and our audience here and online as well. So Kevin is the head of Accelerator at Xnode, which is a Chinese innovation company, and basically, again, their market focus is again on China. And till now, Kevin, we have been speaking about the fact that what is the time that startups should actually think of going international, and at what point they should be thinking about it, and we had a little bit of chat about that. But I think you've jumped in just at the right time, because I'm going to talk about different markets in Asia. And again, I'll start with you, Kevin, on that, and then start with you, Christopher, and then move to Kevin. So Asia in itself is such a huge market, and it boggles my mind to just think of the size, because even India in itself, I'm from India, and India in itself is huge, and every city is different. So what are your 3 tips, and what is your starting point when people are actually saying, oh, I want to expand in Asia, give me some advice. What is the opportunity right there? What are the 3 top markets I could look at? So how do you answer that question?
It's rather the startups that rate the markets for themselves based on the industry that are in, that based on the vertical that they're focusing on. So we advise the startups on we help them through the mentorship, through the networking also, to find, as I said, this product market fit, and to really do market research early on by meeting experienced experts from these ecosystems, so that they also understand what are the hot topics actually in the particular markets, and where can I start my business over there. So this is very important to consider, that it's basically the startups themselves that rate the country based on the suitability. I mean, we see different verticals, different topics that are relevant in different countries in Southeast Asia. So that's why it's very important to let the startups basically rate for themselves.
Okay. So Kevin, what's your pitch for China as the hot market to expand into?
Yeah, I don't really want to pitch, because we actually work with a lot of startups where we need to tell them, China is not a market for you. And I think that's an important lesson to take away here. Is chances are, if you think about China as this huge market where you can get all of these potential customers, first do a couple of quick checks in order to really make sure China is indeed an opportunity for you, because 90% of the startups I talk to are not a fit for China. But then again, I guess China has 3 things going for itself. And that's the size, That's the technological advancement. And then certainly also the availability of capital here. So, I mean, size is quite obvious, and you have all these potential customers if your business model really fits the market. Secondly, technologically, China is on a whole other level in terms of many parameters, and something that many people, you know, living in the West don't like evidently know about. But there's a couple of tech verticals where China is world leading, and if you are in one of those verticals, China might very well be the market for you. And then also thirdly, the availability of capital. So looking for venture capital, it's not easy to raise in China. Again, like, you need to have a compelling pitch and you need to have the fit with the market. And then also Chinese VCs are very much protecting their downsides, and also you might deal with you know, liquidation preferences and dividend rights and so on that you're not used to from the Western market. But if you again have the fit, then there's high potential of raising nice rounds here.
So when you say you have a vertical focus, it's a good market. Could you explain a bit into that? Like, give us a specific example where you think it's great to be in China if you're this.
Yeah, sure. So you always want to make sure that you are in line with China's 10 or 5-year plans, right? So it really pays reading up on those and then taking a look at which areas China wants to focus on. And so, for example, what we did as an accelerator, we very much consciously positioned ourselves to be in line with those values. And some of those are medical tech. Certainly also for, you know, a couple of German startups, great opportunity, because we do have very nice medtech startups in Germany. Smart manufacturing, same thing, very much something that China is trying to develop more of, as well as, you know, Germany's strength in that area. And you know, education tech, robotics, those are definitely a couple of areas.
Okay. So, Michael, with you, you've pretty much been there, done that. So tell us about your experience from being in Berlin and internationally scaling also into a complicated market like China, complicated and exciting and opportunistic as well. And how did all this start and how did it come to your mind and why China? And share some learnings with us on that front.
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, we are active in China now since mid-2018, roughly. For us, it was one of the most important markets, given that 70 to 75% of the volume that we are moving across the globe is coming out of China. So for us to be in control of the supplier communication and to build up a relationship there was quite critical to the success of the business. We have early on, of course, also experienced the difficulties of starting a company in China, being it legal modalities that were new to us, but also, as Kevin just mentioned, of course, the conversations with investors were, for the first time ever, as you mentioned before, I was faced with, let's say, dividend paragraphs that I've never seen before in venture capital contracts. But let's say, putting all of this aside, for us, 2 or 3 things were super critical in the success of launching our arm in China, which is today about 70 people in size and 4 offices in Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Ningbo, and Shanghai. Number 1, we of course needed someone on board that has local experience with administration, but of course also in terms of local hiring. So we were very fortunate to find a really experienced manager. She's in China pretty much for her whole life, in the logistics sector as well. And with her, also a few colleagues that she worked with for the last 15 to 20 years followed in order to join Forto then mid to late 2019. Second one, we had a person that is really well acquainted with everything going on at Forto and kind of like the cultural connect to this new hub and satellite. Yeah. So he's been with the company since the very beginning. So he was basically able to make sure onboarding works well, that we convey the right values into this new group of people that is pretty distant if you think that there's not just 7 hours in between us, but also a few thousand kilometers, and that it's quite hard as a fast-growing company. I mean, since the lockdown, one and a half people joined Forto, to keep up with this pace. Yeah? And the third part was that we had a very, very experienced local manager that has been working in similar settings, so he knows how to bridge that gap, and he knows how to fill the void of distance and time by being a super good communicator, by knowing European and Asian culture well enough, and being an expert for the last 20 years in the logistics sector. So I think in a nutshell, for us, it really paid off to take the risk and invest in experience with launch entering in China.
Actually, very specific and good examples. Definitely something I'm also taking away with me. So thank you for sharing that. And Stephanie, that brings me to you, because I think you were also keen to share some perspective on how, whether we can actually expand into Asian countries or China, you know, by not having locals there, or not having a local, no, I wouldn't say local, but not really having a local presence, because I know this was, I think, GE's tagline once, like, go local and then expand into Asian markets. So is it possible to actually not have a local presence in a market like China or Asia and still think of expanding?
I think it fully depends on the business format. For example, if you are a tech startup, you need a really, really strong bonding with the local ecosystem and media environment. So you need a very strong bonding with the government relation in China. So that means definitely you need a physical team here in China with a very regular connection with China. Because you don't know, like, in what day there will be like a PR crisis happen, whatever. If your whole team is in Europe or in US too far away, you can't really handle all of the things. But I think there is another example about how to do the global expansion, but it's not in the tech industry. For example, it's in consumer goods industry. It's really, really possible, because actually consumer goods industry started in China like 20 years before for the multinational companies' entry to China. So there are very, very structuralized the ecosystems there. There are a group of very strong local contact, like the local distributors there. So I would suggest, if you are a physical product, you want to establish your entry to China, the first thing you would consider is not only establishing a physical team there, because it means a lot to you, because it's a very high cost for you to hire people, to set up a team, to have an office, to have everything there. Instead, I would say, just try to have a local partnership first. So when you have the partnership, and then you will see actually your product does work or not. Because when you're trying to hire the local team, the thing is you have to continuously to hire the people which actually can help you to do the business. But as a founder, without any presence in China market, actually the hardest thing for you is to judge whether the people can help you or not, right? But at the beginning, it's really hard for you to identify the right person for you. So trying to trust a local partnership, the good thing is actually the partners, they know the market really well. So when they grow the business into a certain scale, you can have your business back. So this is what I face a lot of things, because originally I started in China. I worked in China for many years. What we see is actually there are lots of brands, the local companies, they do really well in China market. Then after a few years, the headquarters says, we want our brand back. So we will set up formal team in China. We do everything from our own. So, but actually the base has been built by the local partnership. So that's what I mean. I feel in this case, it's also possible as a low entry point. You can trust a partnership in the beginning. Then when you grow to a certain scale, then you have it back. Then you do everything from your own.
Thank you. I mean, now I'll go back to the bigger picture of Asia, and that brings me to you, Christopher. I mean, when you said that the startups rate countries for themselves? Which are the ones that they are usually most interested in when it comes to Asia?
I mean, here I can refer to the countries that we are focusing on in the German Accelerator. So we are present in Singapore as a soft landing pad. We are having programs with India, with South Korea, with Japan, and we've seen a large surge of interest by German startups in Southeast Asia, in expanding to Southeast Asia and settling down there. I mean, for example, just in this first quarter of 2020, we had the highest number of participants in our Southeast Asia program, and this even despite the COVID-19 situation. So. In this respect, there is plenty of interest in these countries, especially given the large diversity also of business contacts and for example, when it comes to mobility, when it comes to smart city, when it comes to smart factory, etc. There's like the different regions apply to different startups, and so that's why we can attract a lot of different startups also for our programs in these countries.
So give us some examples of where they have truly gone international successfully at the stage where you deal with them.
Yes, so there's two examples that especially highlight the progress that the startups have through our program. So one example is Wagawin. This is a marketing tech company. They participated in our Southeast Asia program in 2018, and they, as an outcome or as the outcome of their participation, they revamped their entire global value proposition based on validation workshops, based on the very close interaction with experts from various fields, and this really they told us that this program has really helped them leverage their full potential, or the full potential that is in their solution, that is in their technology. As a result, they have totally redesigned their website, totally redesigned their setup, and overall they said, well, German Accelerator helped us fast forward our international expansion. Another example is a very relevant example right now. It's Prime Vector Technologies. They are right now participating in our Southeast Asia program, and they develop affordable vaccination for COVID-19. They have identified Southeast Asia as a suitable market out of two reasons. The first reason is that Southeast Asia is a biotechnology hub, that's for sure. And second, there is developing countries in Asia. They need affordable vaccination for COVID-19. So this trend or this COVID-19 situation has made them really identify this market in like the Southeast Asian market as a very suitable market for them and for the product, also providing a very beneficial impact there.
So actually, that's an interesting talk point on how has COVID changed things. And I would really like to hear from Michael on this, that for you personally as a startup founder based in Berlin, so closely working with China, how has the COVID situation changed things, and what were your immediate steps to deal with this? Or, I mean, because from the outside, it seems like a lot would have changed, but I've been hearing from founders that it's not the case. So would love to know your perspective.
So, I mean, first of all, maybe how did we perceive it from a sequence of events? And second of all, what was the outputs that we have experienced as a company? given the exposure in China, for us, COVID was present as of mid-January. We established a task force being responsible to manage communication between the offices. And then more or less we had three core goals. And number one, of course, keeping everyone safe and healthy, made sure that employees could go into home office as soon as possible, and that we prepared the company from an infrastructure and setup perspective for a longer period of remote work. Second one was keeping up safe and reliable operations. I mean, there were many companies relying on regular updates on the supply chain, on their logistics value chain. So that was our core focus, to make sure that nothing's falling apart. And then later on in the crisis, when it basically became apparent that the virus would not basically be contained within Chinese borders, but would potentially also affect Europe, we basically followed that same principle in Europe as well. So shifted early March into home office, made sure operations are staying up safe and reliably. And then the third point that came a little bit more into the focus of the company when the virus also hit Europe was a famous statement by our CFO now saying, never waste a crisis. Yeah, so we also saw it as our chance and obligation to look out for opportunities that may arise within those special times. And if I now look back on how this chain of events has influenced the company and the current state of the business, I think that for us it has generated quite a tailwind. Primarily given by the fact that today most of the supply chain departments are being seen as a cost center, and quarterly KPIs and targets are most of the times focused around decreasing cost and investment into the logistics value chain. And I think that COVID has shown very impressively that most likely logistics and the supply chain that you're basically holding up and running and maintaining, it may not be a core differentiator and may not be a value driver of the business in the sense that you win the market with a more competitive supply chain, but you most certainly will lose if it doesn't work well and if you're not set up for the future to manage also a longer period of time in a more distributed and remote setting. That has helped us to continue quite massive growth during this time, be more or less 20 to 25% over budget, and therefore grow again more than 2.5x 2019 to 2020.
Could you repeat the last line? I think I lost you in that.
Those tailwinds have enabled us to grow again with about 2.5 to 3x in terms of business volume and revenues from 2019 to 2020 in the 5th year of operation of the company.
Okay, that's actually indeed a very interesting perspective and very impressive as well. So congratulations. Kevin, I think you have something to say here in terms of what the perception is about how COVID has changed things and how people are looking at expanding into China or generally the game for startups. If you could give us some personal experiences or what you hear from the startup industry, the startup ecosystem there, to our audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, very impressive, Michael. So I think that's really a good feat. And I do think that's like a typical symbol of this crisis, right? It accentuates the disparities. So you have a couple of big winners and then you have a couple of big losers. Whereas, in 2007, 2008, you mostly had big losers. This time it's a bit different. So I mean, in terms of, I think there's two parts to it. First of all, Xnode as a business itself, and then I can also shortly talk about what I see startups doing and how I see the VC landscape changing. So Xnode itself also had to struggle a lot, right? Because we bring in companies, startups from abroad into China. So far, we had only done this physically. So suddenly that totally broke away. Like the budget that I created at the beginning of the year was completely useless by April, May. And so what we started doing and what also other accelerators started doing is offering virtual programs of different sorts, different durations, different focus areas, and so on. And the surprising thing to me personally was that this also worked. It's definitely less fun. I do think the personal element is a very important one, but it does also work, and it also adds sometimes even more value because founders are able to connect with, you know, probably not just people, potential partners and customers in Shanghai, but also in Shenzhen or in Beijing through a Zoom call, which before that wasn't quite as accepted, I guess, you know, by potential partners. Now, having that said that, we do see that a lot of startups right now are still focused very much on themselves. So it's not like we have a big pull from countries that we work with, like different European countries like Russia, Australia, Korea, Singapore, and so on. We do really need to do our own part and reach out to these companies directly. But what maybe the last caveat to also talk about the VC industry a little bit and the investing activities. Investing still goes on, and I was expecting to see a very, very big dip in terms of, you know, investments and investing activity. There has been quite a dip in Q1, at least in China. But I see it recovering pretty quickly, and something that before was unthinkable, right? To invest or chip in money into a seed stage company without having seen their founders personally, it was totally unthinkable, is now suddenly reality, and to be honest, so far seems to be working quite well.
So when you say the funding has not been affected or rather gone up, are you talking about funds outside China investing in China, or is it Chinese funds investing in Chinese startups, or is it HNIs, high net worth individuals? What kind of investment are we talking here about?
So in total, of course, at the beginning of the year, you have a big dip, both in terms of amount of venture capital as well as amount of venture capital deals in China. But if you split it up, and if you look at, or once you look at how it continues throughout the year, this year, at least RMB funds are quite active. So for us, that's, you know, an RMB fund. You also have USD funds. I presume that those would be performing a bit worse and will have done less deals. And I'm also not saying it's not like it didn't go down. It definitely did go down, but it could have been much worse given the total situation. And then also maybe something to add that works in our favor is that in conversations with founders of startups, but also SMEs, I see that many of them now understand the value of geographic diversification much more. And looking at the Chinese market, the strong way it recovered, and here life right now is basically normal. It's you know, it's very apparent that, okay, maybe it makes sense to diversify geographically as early as possible in order to secure our you know, top and bottom line.
Yeah, I just want to build on one point. Yeah. It's very exciting because actually he mentioned about the fund seeking. So actually I also have like a panel tomorrow to talk about fund seeking in China after COVID. So exactly as what he mentioned. So China's situation is like from 2013 to 2015, that's 2 years. It's really like fund booming environment in that period. No matter which kind of startup you are, if you are doing something connected to internet or tech, you can get funding. So that's really like a hot season. But in recent years, it's a little bit cooling down, which means the investors, they are more conscious in selecting the company to invest in, but it doesn't mean they don't have money. They still have a huge money behind, but after COVID, they become a little bit sensitive. So they are cautious in investing, but each investment is like huge money. So even in this year, after COVID, there happens a lot of things like, I heard one of the company which 3.5 times its valuation in 9 months. So which makes them reaching like 12 billion RMB in 9 months. It's really like a very big thing in China, and it's not like single thing happen in China. So that's why I'm thinking about, very much agree with what Kevin said. So it's, you should diversify your geographic thinking whenever you started a company, because actually the other market maybe not only contribute to your sales, but also contribute to your overall company's roadmap and also helping you to get funding.
What do you think, Christopher? How apprehensive are people in Europe looking at Asia right now because of the COVID situation, or it hasn't changed anything?
From my point of view, it hasn't changed. As I said, the German startups are really interested in the Southeast Asian market because of its high diversity, because of the growth opportunities there, and so I think. Yeah, as all of us, we needed to adapt to a certain extent to this situation, but this didn't mean that startups were more cautious or have been more cautious when it comes to expanding.
Since I'm the only Indian person on this panel, I can tell you that even funds like Sequoia and Lightspeed have invested in India during the COVID times, launched three funds, also focused on Southeast Asia, one of them absolutely on India, and it's $275 million US dollars. But these are international markets, and they are still looking at countries which are right now not in as much of a better COVID situation than we are. I mean, we all know that there are a lot of Asian countries going on challenges right now, but still the show goes on when it comes to VC investments. We cannot have a panel about internationalization without talking about the talent that actually comes from Asian countries to Europe or international companies. And I think for this, I would ask first you, Christopher, and then you, Michael, in terms of how, probably with Michael first, that in Forto, how international you are in terms of talent, and how is it actually to have different cultures working together, some based in Europe, some in other countries, and how do you bring this diverse team together? Give us the recipe for that.
Yeah. I mean, by now we have more than 50 different nationalities working at Forto, and I think about 60% of all employees are German, 40% are international, and about 35% female co-workers. And even though being in a very male-heavy industry, I don't want to basically whitewash this. Yeah, but I think the big opportunity that we had at hand, and we're trying to leverage in our daily doing, is that we can bring together the best of both worlds, bringing in experienced logistics managers that have been in this industry for 5, 10, 20 years, but at the same time also rather young, hungry, very, very driven entrepreneurial people that might have just come out of their first startup and that have built and sold a company successfully, or that have managed large-scale technology organizations for a longer period of time, like our SVP engineering, for example, Barzell, who joined us from Workday, where he ran the machine learning and AI team. And so this is basically then a unique blend of people, yeah, that are on the one hand, of course, very young, innovative, driven, hungry, very dynamic. At the same time, though, also very experienced, calm, having been through a lot of things, probably not as sensitive to daily changes, yeah, have worked in larger organizations and not only startups before, which has its upsides definitely. And in the end, it creates really a unique mix of people that is very balanced in the sense that we try to aim and shoot for maximum degree of innovation power, but at the same time also relationships between people become a much higher importance. Why? Because in logistics, that's all those people have been living from. Yeah, I think there was no technology lock-in for customer relations, and people were working for years and years in complex partnership relations. So the relationship that you build up with with each and everyone you work with is kind of like creating the value that you create in the end. That has basically been the general case for all of those guys joining from logistics companies. And I think for us, it's helped really to improve and enhance the culture quite significantly from that perspective. And that's what I'm really thankful for.
And to both of you, actually, in terms of, first to you, Christopher, in terms of differences, you know, like we also spoke about this in one of the morning panels, like cultural differences where you actually get to learn a lot, you know, and it, like European startups can learn from Asian startups and Asian startups can learn from European startups. So what are these cultural differences that you see on a very regular basis, being in the middle of all this?
Yeah, I think it's mainly two things. First of all, it's the communication, how you communicate. I mean, we're talking a lot about cross-cultural communication, but in the end, it's also it's very important to actually exchange, to enable startups from Europe, startups from Southeast Asia, also from the US, to actually come together and to exchange their cultures. I think that's very important and makes like this cross-cultural communication very tangible. And then of course it's what is also very important is how to build relationships, like intercultural relationships. I mean, it's totally different in Southeast Asia than it is in the Western countries. So also for German startups, it's very important to understand that, and they can best understand it as they get in touch with as the cultures get in touch, and also for them to plan when it comes to their international expansion. Okay, how do I need to prepare as I go to, for example, Singapore, as I go to Japan, as I go to South Korea? How do I need to prepare when it comes to communication, when it comes to building relationships? And I think if you can exchange your cultures as early as possible, then this helps you very much in the long term as well.
Do you want to add on that? What are the kind of cultural, like when you say communication, give us some nice examples.
Yeah, I mean, it's for example how you decide, how you persuade, how you meet, how you set up meetings, and yeah, I think
how pushy you are with things,
yeah.
how you follow up. I think yeah, Stefani, do you want to add, like, because you are pretty much on the building bridge between really two, and where is it that you have to do most of the explanation? Okay, this is not really how you communicate, when you are, yeah. So give us some perspective on that.
I would say there are too much culture difference, like, because both of us from Asia, we know like actually how Asians think about, and I think in Asia it's very much like looking for speed. And looking for, in China, it's much more like back and forth. I think the working culture is completely different from Germany, which I think in Germany it's very much straightforward in terms of the communication, and also in terms of the way we do things, they are also very different. So that causes a lot of, how to say, confusion, and sometimes it's back and forth in terms of the working. Because not only working with Germany, I also, before I moved to Germany, when I was in China, I also worked with UK company, a company in Netherlands, a lot of different countries. The thing is actually coming from different culture, the more thing is about you have to spend a lot of time in communication and also in building trust. because when they have a full communication and when they have enough trust, it's much easier for the team, cross-geography team, really bond together, and that can have much better working result. So I think it's more taking time to understand each other instead of like each party, they are always thinking about from their own cultural perspective to do something in their own, something like that. So actually it takes a lot of time, but no matter it's startup or it's a big corporate, I think whatever company format, you should really pay attention about how differently people are thinking about, than to do the bridge for that.
Okay. So that is, and I think there's one question that we at AsiaBerlin usually always hear from startups is that when Asian startups are looking at expanding into Berlin specifically so that they can expand into Europe, what is their roadmap? What is that they should do the first thing, and why is it that Berlin is, first of all, what do you think about how Berlin is the place if they are looking at Europe, and how should they be expanding into Germany from Asia?
Yeah, I think what is very significant about Berlin is that there is plenty of like different stakeholders here, different like the startup ecosystem is buzzing. You have not only startups, you have investors, you have corporates, you also have the government. So you have plenty of actors here. So for Southeast Asian startups coming to Europe, coming to Germany, Berlin is definitely a very suitable starting point. And I think especially also when it comes to actually connect with concrete partners, like for pilot projects or for a proof of concepts, that's really essential to also increase the value, right, for a Southeast Asian startup coming to Germany. That is also the value becomes really tangible, right, to test the product on the ground with a corporate, for example, with an SME, I think this is in this respect, Berlin is like the great perfect starting point.
So, Michael, and also like all of you, like, do you guys have any stories or examples where you feel that Asian founders have come to Berlin, and of course we have Naren Sham speaking in the evening. Indian origin founder, founded a company in Berlin, expanded into Europe, and he will share his experiences. But when I talk about early stage startups that are not so big when it comes to their teams, and what Naren Sham was probably when he started out, what are the challenges they have, and are any friends in the ecosystem where you know that these stories have worked out well for all of you? Good.
I need to think about it a minute.
Where
So from my side, maybe, so I can't talk about a specific example, and I just want to like share my perspective, because we do have this discussion a lot here, because I mean we do from abroad to China, and so very obviously we also get asked sometimes by, for example, accelerators abroad, or VCs abroad, hey, can you actually facilitate the transfer from Chinese startups to, you know, another country? And usually the answer is no, unless you really have a very strong industry focus that offers a competitive advantage to what is available here. So most of the early stage startups in China quite obviously stay in China because they have a massive market in front of their door, right? And then once they grow to a certain size that they gain traction in the Chinese market, they are, let's say in 80% of the cases, not interested in Europe as the first expansion step. So for them, it's much more obvious to go to Singapore, to go to lately also India, or to, you know, tune the valuation a little bit and go to the US market, as opposed to tackling this European market that is much more divided, you know. Then as kind of one of the next steps after that, Europe becomes more probable, but it's usually not the first step. And so for some startups, it makes sense, or sometimes we are able to build a bridge, but that's only if, for example, you know, we have a very well-known medical tech cluster, for example, in Europe, and then you can, in a hyper-focused way, bring medtech startups from China to this cluster, you know, with an existing industry partner, then it works.
So you mean to say they need to have a certain scale before thinking of expanding into Europe? Just if I try to summarize it. Okay. But
Yeah, and usually they already have kind of a certain scale,
yeah.
in other cases, and then kind of Europe is not that interesting anymore. Then they are usually shooting for a couple of other markets that I mentioned.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's always interesting to have these conversations because we have it on a daily basis at AsiaBerlin. But I can tell you that there are examples within our community where founders from Asia have expanded. One of them is Aravind Panchi. He's from Sri Lanka, and he's an AsiaBerlin ambassador, scaled up in Berlin and founded his company in Berlin, and many of such stories. But it's always interesting to know because this is a very debatable topic. And so what do you think, Christopher, are the kind of challenges when Asian founders think of starting up in Berlin? Like, what do you hear most often?
Yeah, it's definitely like the regulation. It's definitely where to start. I think it's similar the other way around when we talk about German startups going to Southeast Asia. So yeah, we definitely see that. Perhaps also to add to our points that we just discussed, we, the German Accelerator, actually power a program called Accelerator, and this builds the bridges for Singaporean startups to come to Germany actually, and yeah, partner with corporates like SMEs in order to expand their business to Germany, and for these startups, yeah, it's very much about like what is the market about. I mean, it's also for Southeast Asian startups or for the particular Singaporean startups. It's like Europe is also very, I mean, a very diverse. And so for them it's important to have a partner here that they can really start out with. So yeah, regulation and is a major aspect, and finding the appropriate problem also. I mean, it's also on the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I also got a example, so which is also my panel guest tomorrow. So his name is Xin, and he is from China originally, and he is right now in Berlin, and he started a company which is for a smart city solution. So he started a company actually in Germany, and with China as one of the destination market. Meanwhile, he also go to Australia, and Germany is also part of their market. So I think what good for him is originally he's coming from Asia, so he knows the destination market really well. And meanwhile, he studies. He had university in Berlin, and also meanwhile he fight his co-founder. So his co-founder is local German. So that's why actually he is trying to harmonize a lot of resources together, and they were trying to build the technology and the tech part in Berlin based on this startup culture and all the things supporting here. The ecosystem is really good here, and meanwhile they target a larger geographical market. So that's also what I see the internationalization means, because before I moved here, when I was in Shenzhen, I also worked for a startup. So the founder, they were thinking internationalization, it's not create something in one market and bring it to another. Instead, they create the product in UK, so they have the product in UK, the brand is in UK, but they target the market in China. So that's why actually it helps them to grow much faster than any other companies, because when they started, they already know how to leverage the resource internationally. Yeah.
Actually, I'm also taking a lot of notes here as the communication person for AsiaBerlin, and I feel like these are stories that personally we also need to collect within our community and tell that how Asian founders actually did things in Berlin and scaled up in Berlin. So good to know that we have that topic as something there where we need more stories. So follow us on Twitter. Doing my pitch here, and we just have another 2 minutes or 3 minutes for the panel, I think. And just as a takeaway or summarizing it, if I could have one line from each of you in terms of the most important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking of internationalization as a startup, what would it be? Think of it as like one takeaway that you would want people to take from this panel when they're thinking of internationalization. So let's start with, I can see my view is this, so I'll start from here. So Michael.
My view would be, don't do it too early, don't do it too late, and really think about all the different parts in the value chain and your organization that will change, and start communicating as early as possible with the people for whom the change will be the biggest.
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, so dedicate enough management attention to your expansion, because if you have management, and this is in our case founders, really focused on the expansion, then it can go very well. If they are not, then it can also very well be that you lose a lot of money and time.
Okay, for me, I think it's keep an open mindset. So no matter where you go, no matter where you started, like listen more, and especially when you meet people from different culture, trying to understand more, listen up, then try to practice something maybe beyond what you were originally thinking, and that really helps.
Yeah, my take is think about internationalization as early as possible, and prepare and execute internationalization with partners, for example, the German Accelerator.
And AsiaBerlin. And also on that note, in terms of internationalization, if you want to know anything about how to internationalize in Berlin, there is definitely AsiaBerlin. There is Berlin Partners, which does that on a very focused view when it comes to talent, technology, and they track everything in terms of how startups are going international. So this is your resource book, and we will also tweet it today because there's already so much that we have gained in this panel, and let's go international from Berlin into Europe and also into Asia. So thank you very much for your time, Stefani, Kevin, Michael, and Christopher. And it was really lovely talking to you about internationalization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Have a great afternoon, and talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.